Hi, Leah Church. Welcome to Sports Spectrum. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. It's great to connect with you. You got a fantastic story. I can't wait for everybody to hear it during your time with North Carolina. But being a UNC alum, as we talk, you got the UNC sweatshirt on, you got the jersey behind you as we record this on Zoom. So clearly your roots lie deep with the Tar Heels, and it had to be pretty cool to watch them go all the way to the national championship from the men's side back in April. That must have been amazing to see as a fan and as an alum.
Oh, it was. I thought it was one of the most exciting March Madness in several years. Obviously, that may be because Carolina was in it and made it to the Final Four. But to then play Duke, in the Final Four game and pull out that win, that was really cool to see. So I was really proud of our guys.
And Coach Hubert Davis, who we've done many stories on, really outspoken and loves the Lord. And you can just sense that his identity is not rooted in him as a coach or even as a former player, but as a follower of Jesus. What was it like to watch him on the biggest stage, get this opportunity? And I also understand you got to know him a little bit during your playing time.
I did. I was involved in Athletes in Action during my time at UNC, and he also was involved in it. And so he would host like a supper at the end of the year, and I was able to go to his house and meet him and his family and shoot some hoops on his court that he has in his backyard, which was really cool. But it was awesome to see how the Lord blessed him this season and to see the success he had. But then to also use that platform to share his faith and share Jesus, I think it's awesome how he used it. I'm really happy for him. He's a
Yeah.
great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and we're looking forward to hopefully having him on this show for sure at some point. So your roots go pretty far back as far as UNC, right? Like you grew up as a fan of the Tar Heels as a kid, correct?
Yes, sir, I did. I mean, I grew up with, I had no choice but to bleed Carolina blue. Like my family, they're all diehard Carolina fans. And so from a very young age, I loved Carolina and I started attending UNC women's basketball camp when I think I was 7 years old. And so once I started playing in like Carmichael Arena, which was the court that, Michael Jordan played on, and then the Dean Smith Center, which is where our guys play, I was like, I've got to someday play for the University of North Carolina. And so I was the kid that had the Carolina bedroom, that had the closet full of Carolina stuff and had Tar Heel birthday parties. Like it was Carolina blue all day, every day. So yes, the roots run really deep for me.
Well, let's talk about this for a second because that other team that you guys just beat in the Final Four on the men's side, uh, did they come after you and recruit you at all? I'm curious how that works, or was it kind of the mind was made up? Listen, that's a place I can't go to, or does recruiting and opportunities like that change the mindset a little bit?
Well, it's funny you asked that because they actually invited me to their camp. I think it was the summer of my sophomore year. And so like I was like, oh, should I go or should I not? I mean, like here I am, the biggest Carolina fan ever. But I chose to go because, like you say, with opportunities, you never know, and you just kind of have to walk with what's before you. And so I went to Duke camp, and I actually was one of the best basketball camps like that I've been to. And I had to wear the Duke jersey though, and that went against everything in me. I felt like I was like betraying my Tar Heels. But after that, I don't know, the interest didn't really, I don't know, continue, and so I didn't really have to make that choice between Duke and Carolina. So that was probably a good thing because it was going to be an obvious choice.
Well, you did have to make a choice between another school and North Carolina, which we'll tell that story in a second.
Okay.
But tell me about your high school years, because you were homeschooled, right? And so it
Yes,
wasn't
sir.
like your typical going to school, inside a school and playing for that school. It was a little different for you and trying to find your stride as a basketball player. You clearly did that by going to a place like North Carolina. So take me through
Right.
what high school years were like for you.
Yeah, so like you said, I was homeschooled all the way through, which was one of the biggest blessings in my life. But it did kind of pose a little bit more of a challenge for trying to find a competitive team to play on. And so we ended up finding a private school in Kernersville, North Carolina, that allowed like homeschoolers to play on it. And it was a team that traveled everywhere, traveled to New York, we traveled to Florida. So it was kind of like a showcase team, but it was during the school season. So it was exactly what I needed, to get my name out there and get exposure. And so I'm really thankful the Lord brought that into my life because before I was playing for some homeschool teams, but it just wasn't the competitiveness I needed. And so thankfully, the Lord brought that team into my life. And like you say, I mean, it just, with homeschooling, it allows the flexibility to do more. And so I could get my schoolwork done, like in the morning hours and then travel to Kernersville, practice in the afternoon and evening. And so it just allowed a lot of flexibility, gave me time to work on my craft, to work on basketball. So yeah, I love being homeschooled and I'm thankful for it.
So there was never a time at all throughout your high school years where you thought maybe if I just played for a high school team, I could showcase my skills in a better way. There was never any moments like that for you, huh?
No, once I got that team in Kernersville, it's called Forest Trail Academy. I mean, it was actually, we were ranked, I think, top 10 in the state of North Carolina. So it was about the most competitive team that got, and we had college coaches coming to our practices. We had college coaches at these tournaments we would play in. So I really couldn't have gotten on any better high school team than I did.
When did you realize you were pretty good at this basketball thing?
From an early age, I could always shoot the ball. I'm not the most athletic. I'm not the tallest. I'm 5'8" with my basketball shoes on. So, normally Division I shooting guards are like 6', 6'2". So I was lacking in the height department and a little bit in the athleticism department, but I could always shoot the ball. Like I said, ever since I was little. And so I worked really hard too. Like I took it very seriously. I just had that innate passion to do my best and give it my all. Colossians 3:23 says, do everything as unto the Lord. And so I really try to live by that. And so probably my sophomore year is when I turned to mom one day and I said, I really want to pursue playing Division I basketball. And she would do it. We started trying to line things up and all that. So that's when I was really like, let's try to make this dream come true.
That's a really fascinating story. I think, tell us about how you came to UNC, because that story with UNC and North Carolina State is a pretty good one.
It is very neat how the Lord works. So by my junior year, I had received like little to no interest from UNC. I had been attending camps ever since I was 7 years old, but let's just say the interest wasn't very mutual. And so like the coaches knew me because I came to camp and I knew the coaches, but like I said, the interest really wasn't there. And so I had a teammate that was committed to NC State. And NC State would come to our practices, they would come to our tournaments and watch us. And so they saw me play and they offered me a walk-on spot on their team. So I was like, okay, well, like this is ACC, it's high level Division I, for whatever reason, like I didn't understand why God had made me this huge diehard UNC basketball fan for me to go play for the Wolfpack. But I was like, we don't always understand what the Lord has for us. And so that was what was before me. So I committed to NC State and I was like, this must be the Lord's plan for my life. I don't understand it, but it must be. Well, interestingly enough, a month later, we received an email from the assistant coach at UNC, Coach Tracy Williams Johnson, and it simply said, give Coach Hatchell a call. And Coach Hatchell's the head coach at UNC. And so I gave Coach Hatchell a call, and she proceeded to tell me, she's like, Leah, I don't know how a UNC Tar Heel girl could commit to the Wolfpack. And I was like, well, I didn't even know that y'all could possibly be interested because trust me, I've been like waiting for this phone call forever. And she's like, I want to see you face to face. Come for a visit as soon as you can. So we went for a visit, me, my mom, and sister, because my dad was on a mission trip actually. And so we toured the campus, even though I'd been there about 100 times, watching Carolina basketball games because I grew up going. But that evening we had a meeting scheduled with Coach Hatchell. And so we got into her office and I was sitting across from her face to face and we were just small talking. And she had told me that she had seen some cards that I had sent her and she had struggled with battle with leukemia a couple years before. And I had sent her some like get well cards just to let her know I'm praying for her and all that. But she had kept them and opened her drawer and saw them. And she said that she had had Leah Church on her mind for weeks and she couldn't sleep. And she told her husband that she just couldn't get Leah Church off of her mind. And so then she uttered the words that literally changed my life. She said, Leah, the Lord told me to offer you a scholarship to play basketball at UNC, and all you have to do is say yes. Wow. And so, of course, I'm sitting there with tears just streaming down my face because, like, the reality of this dream that I've been holding on to and all the prayers and hard work, it was actually paying off. And so that's the story. I mean, it was all God. Like I said, I'm not the tallest. I'm not the most athletic. And, the chances of me playing for UNC when that's, like, the only team I wanted to play for are basically impossible. But, God loves doing the possible because it shows how big he is. And so we serve a pretty big God.
Great story. And no hard feelings with North Carolina State either. I mean, they had a great season this year, right? No hard feelings there.
They've had great seasons for the past, 4 or 5 years. So I'm happy for them and repping the state of North Carolina. So yeah, no hard feelings.
So tell me about your faith. You've referenced it multiple times, and obviously that's what this show is about. Your faith in the Lord and when it became your own. Because I think, I have a daughter who we raised in the church, and You know, I think sometimes I see her faith and I understand it's just kind of what she's been through for her whole life.
Mhm.
But at some point, she's going to leave this house, going to go to college, and she's going to have to make that faith her own. When
Yes,
did you
sir.
make that faith your own?
Right. Well, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad is a full-time missionary evangelist. Like I said, my mom homeschooled me and my sister. So we were raised in the ways of the Lord. And I got saved at a young age when I was 5 years old. And so, like you say, I mean, you grow up, with your faith, but sometimes it's your parents' faith and you're just living it. But when I went to Forest Trail Academy my junior year, that I was around some influences and stuff and just kind of out in the world more than I had been. So because like I said, I've been homeschooled, and so that's when I really saw, oh, like this is the real world.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I started to see like I was gonna have to own my faith and be willing to stand for my beliefs. And heading into North Carolina, like I had a purpose in my heart. Like I was going to be faced with peer pressure. I was going to be faced, with things that didn't necessarily line up with like biblical principles. And was I going to be able to stand even if it's lonely, even if I'm not liked? Like I had a purpose that in my heart before I ever went to North Carolina. And so I think my senior year of high school, I understood that, and I really started to take ownership of my faith and to make the decision like, am I going to stand?
Leah Church is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, former UNC women's basketball player. So you get to North Carolina, and the first couple of years, things are going well, as far as I know from reading your story. And it's later on where God kind of convicts you a little bit and he starts to open your eyes maybe a little bit to some things. So describe your time early on when you're at UNC and you get there, especially as a freshman and you're so young, you're
Right.
18, 19 years old and just trying to, especially as a homeschooled kid,
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to live in the world, but not be
Right.
of the world. So, what was
Mhm.
that like for you coming to North Carolina and adapting to this collegiate world?
Right. Well, like you say, being homeschooled, the first time I'd ever sat in a classroom was my freshman year at UNC.
Wow.
So, you go from like literally having a class of two people, me and my sister, to go into UNC Chapel Hill, which is, one of the bigger universities. And so, but I actually did great. Like I had no problem adapting like to the school, to the environment, the setting. But like you said, I think the hardest part, like is being in the world but not of the world. And so you have to make choices to, are you going to do things to be liked, or are you willing to stand alone and maybe not be as liked and as accepted? And as Christians, we're called to be set apart, and it's not always easy to live that life that's set apart, because everybody wants to have friends, everybody wants to be liked. And so that was one of the adjustments I had to make going into just the college environment, and then also like the athletic environment. But my first couple years at Carolina, I mean, it was a dream come true for me to be able to wear that jersey right there behind me that I had always dreamed of, to be able to play in Carmichael Arena where Michael Jordan played. They still in our locker room have the door frame that he would run out of. They
Mm.
preserve that. And so it's like a short door frame that if you're taller than about 6'3", you have to duck to go under. But just the history and seeing the banners. And I remember my first game I played at Carolina, just tears going down my face, because as a little kid, 7 years old, like I had shot, baskets on these goals and always hoped and dreamed of having this opportunity. So repping the Carolina uniform, it was amazing. And I'm just thankful that God gave me that, chance. But like you said, after my junior year, things kind of changed with the coaching change and all that. So I don't know if we want to start getting into that or not. So whatever direction you want to go.
Oh, we will get into it for sure, because I think that's an important part of your story. Let me go back to two questions, I guess. First, did you ever meet Michael Jordan? I have to imagine you didn't meet him. No.
I didn't mean to, trust me. I wish so badly that I had. And I mean, he's been to several like men's games and
Yeah.
football games and all, but it never like lined up to where like the women's basketball team got to meet him. So maybe someday. I'm still hoping, because I mean he is the face of North Carolina basketball. So that would be awesome to be able to meet him one day.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of the face of it of
Of basketball.
basketball since 1985. Let's just put it that
That's
way,
right.
right? The
Yeah,
GOAT.
that's
Um,
true.
the other question I wanted to ask you before we get into what happened your junior year is just your favorite moments. I mean, you're still a kid trying to play basketball and have a lot of fun playing at the highest level of college basketball. Do you have a moment or two, and it could be from any of the years that you played, but what was your favorite moment as a player?
Oh, hands down, my freshman year, we played Duke at Carmichael Arena. It was almost sold out. And that my freshman year, I played some. I mean, I played probably like 10, 11 minutes a game, which was pretty good. I actually exceeded my expectations. But that game, I played 35 minutes and I scored a career high 19 points. And I hit the two 3-pointers in overtime to secure the win versus Duke. And we came back from, I think we were down 19 or 20 points in the fourth quarter against Duke. Came back, brought it to overtime, and then I hit those two big 3-pointers. Greatest feeling I've ever had. I mean, another one where I'm in the parking lot, tears just going down my face because it just was surreal. As a kid that's, grew up in that rivalry, and to have a part in it, it was really cool. So that's hands down my favorite memory at Carolina.
What a great memory. I mean, come on, you're beating Duke and you're helping to be a huge contributor to beating Duke, not just being on the team, but to
Right.
actually be playing in the game and playing a lot in that game.
Right.
What was it like being around teammates, being around coaches, even just other people who
Mhm.
may not have been followers of Christ, and the conversations that take place with that? Because I think all of us who are believers, we all have influence and impact in different places where we're around people who believe different than us. And obviously, you want to be a great teammate, you want to love them, you want to serve them in the place that they're at. But what was that kind of like for you, maybe the first couple of years before you got to your junior year, when you're talking about living your faith in a public way? You don't want to be ashamed of it, certainly, or shy about it, but you don't want to force it in anybody's face either. But you hopefully can build relationships where you can tell others about your faith. What was that like for you,
Right.
those first couple years?
Well, it didn't take long, I don't think, for like my teammates and coaches to see where I stood and to see that I kind of lived a little bit differently. And like you say, I wasn't one of those that like forced it in their face, but I was outspoken about what I believed, why I did the things I did. And, it all goes back to my faith in Jesus Christ and the testimony that I have, with Him. And so, you witness where you can, but it's also about how you live and how you do things differently. And it's all about consistency too. Like you can go in there and maybe make a good choice once or twice, but it's really about over time. Like do you stay true to your beliefs and to your convictions? And so I think consistency is a big thing. And once they see that consistency, they start respecting you and they start respecting your beliefs, and they start seeing that you actually do live differently and you just don't talk it, but you walk the walk. And I think that's really important as a Christian, to not just say you believe these things, but live it as well.
By doing that, did you have opportunities when people will come up and say, "Hey, you know what? You're living a little differently. Tell me more about this." Were you able to have conversations that way?
I had several of those, some with my teammates, but also more just with like fans and younger kids.
Yeah.
They're like, you're different. Like you're my role model. Like I could see that you live differently, and so that really meant a lot to me. That I was like influencing these younger people that saw how I lived or saw what I posted on social media, and that it was just something different. And so then that gives me opportunity, to witness and share. Well, the thing that's different is Jesus in my life, and
Mm.
that's the most important thing you can have.
So take me to your junior year. It's
Okay.
2019,
Mhm.
going into 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020
Mhm.
from a world perspective. But take me through 2019 and your junior year, and kind of
Right.
what the Lord was doing in your spirit that season.
Yeah, so after my sophomore year, Coach Hatchell, the administration was investigating her into some alleged racially insensitive comments, and she was given the choice to either be fired or resign. And she chose to resign, and that was really hard on me because Coach Hatchell, was the one that gave me my opportunity, and she was the reason that like my dream came true to play at UNC. And
Mm.
I always questioned, I was like, Lord, she's been here for 33 years, like she's a Hall of Fame coach, and during my 4-year career, like, why does she have to leave? But I know God always has a plan. And so, like, I was hoping for like another replacement that would really back me in my Christian faith and another strong Christian coach. But the administration went in a different direction, and they cleared out the entire coaching staff that we had and brought in a whole new coaching staff. And there were just some very different expectations and standards and what Christian culture that we did have. It was pretty much erased. And so, like, pregame prayer was now like frowned upon. Our chapel and devotions before games and stuff was done away with. And, it was one of the hardest things in my life, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, because I felt like I was somewhat persecuted for like my faith and my stance. And there were things that were encouraged that I couldn't be a part of. And then I was looked at maybe as not being like a team player, but there were things that went against my convictions and what the Bible says.
Hmm.
And so I played my junior year. It was one of the hardest years of my life. And unfortunately, I started losing my love for the game of basketball. But heading into my senior year, I saw that there were going to be some causes and things that like I couldn't stand for and I couldn't support. So I had to make a choice. Like, am I going to compromise my faith? Am I going to compromise what I believe in? Or am I going to walk away from something that I love, which is basketball? I've loved it ever since I was 3 years old. And I ultimately made the decision that eternity matters more than basketball. And so I chose to walk away and stay true to what the Bible says and to my beliefs rather than play my senior year at UNC.
What kind of response did you get? Maybe from coaches, because you have to have that conversation with them. Maybe
Yeah.
from teammates, and certainly from other people. I would imagine in the faith community, most people are backing you, obviously, and supporting you. But I would hope even outside of that community, there would be some sort of support.
Right.
What was that response like when you had that conversation and said, you know what, I think it's time for me to step away?
Honestly, I don't think the coaches were very surprised. I went to Chapel Hill and I told them face to face. And I mean, it was a good conversation. And like I said, I don't think they were shocked and that I was choosing to step away. And most of my teammates, they supported me. I told most of them face to face, some of them through text. And so, I mean, it ended as well as it could. And so, like you say, the people that had my back in faith, but it was still hard because people were like, why are you giving up on your dream? This was your dream since you were 7 years old. It's your senior year. Like, what are you doing? But it was something that, I obviously prayed a ton about. And it was the hardest decision I've ever made. And I took a whole month of just praying and seeking the Lord's will. And He made it pretty clear to me, like, I had no choice but to walk away from it because I couldn't go against what the Bible says and I couldn't go against my convictions because that's ultimately that's what's gonna matter. Game of basketball, it comes and it goes. I mean, time goes by fast, but eternity is what matters, and my witness for Jesus is what matters. And so that's why I chose to make that decision.
And that was all during the pandemic, right? Like this happens right after the season ends. And I think the season ended, abruptly for everybody that year because of the pandemic, right?
It did, yes. COVID hit after the ACC tournament, which was my final game for Carolina, and they didn't even have, the women's NCAA basketball tournament. And so that also, it kind of made my decision a little bit easier because the next season they had to deal with so much with the restrictions, with the rules and the testing. And I know they had the rule like you couldn't even see your parents because you were in the bubble, which
Mm.
for me that would have been super hard. And I think God knows that. He says He has, our best interest in mind. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. And, looking back, I can see how God's hand was in it all. And He always takes care of His children, and He's done that for me.
Mm. You actually graduated from UNC though. It's not like you walked away completely and said,
No,
I'm done. You actually finished out your
right.
journey, your academic journey, and you got your degree, right?
I did. So I overloaded courses that summer, and then I had one more semester, and I graduated early a semester in December 2020. So COVID actually helped me with that too because we were allowed to take more credits than usual that summer. So I was able to graduate early, get my degree in exercise and sports science with a minor in coaching. So yes, I'm a proud alumni of UNC for sure.
So what now? I mean, you're not playing at this current point. I don't think, maybe
Right.
playing some pickup or whatever. We can talk about
Yes.
scratching that competitive itch in a minute. But what's happening right now with Leah Church?
Right. Well, this past season, I was able to be an assistant coach for our local high school team. And then I'm also doing some training sessions and shooting sessions here locally, and doing some basketball camps. And then ever since my story was shared on the Gospel Coalition and Franklin Graham shared it on Facebook to his 10 million followers, I've
Right?
had a lot of opportunities to share my story and the platform to share my testimony. And so I've got several speaking engagements coming up that I'm super excited about. So basketball is still definitely a huge part of my life, and I've always prayed that the Lord would use basketball and give me a platform through it to share His name. And thankfully, He's done that, and I'm able to share my story and hopefully encourage others, and hopefully ultimately help people change their life for Christ's glory.
Yeah, he's doing it probably in a way you didn't expect, I would imagine,
Never,
right, Leah?
no, never did I think that this was really going to be my path. If you'd asked me, I would have thought at this time of my life I'd be like a grad assistant at a college coaching basketball. But it's not. I'm in my hometown, and then now with the platform that he's given me to go and share my story in several different states, Ohio, Texas, coming up. I've
Mm.
been able to share my story in Mexico and in Texas at a mission trip. So like it's just really neat to see what the Lord's done and how he's using my story. It's not necessarily how I would have written it. I would have loved to finish up, play my senior year at Carolina, end on a high note. But it's my testimony, it's my story. Like I said, I don't think God makes mistakes, and he can always use, our hurt and our pain to bring him glory. And so that's what matters.
Why was it important to share your story, like with a gospel coalition, with Sports Spectrum? Why is it important to share that story? Obviously, I don't think you're sharing it expecting someone with 10 million followers on Facebook to share it to, thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
But it's important at some point for you to say, okay, I want to share my story. I want to let people know the reason why I made the decision that I made with North Carolina and
Right.
how important the Lord is in my life. Why was it important for you to share that story?
Well, I've always told the Lord, like, I'm never going to turn down an opportunity to share my faith. So if you bring me the opportunities, I'm going to take them. And he's taken that very literally. He's given me a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
And so when the Gospel Coalition approached me, they wanted to know my story of why I left UNC. And honestly, that's the first time I really shared that side of my story. I've given my testimony to teams and all about the miracle of me getting to UNC and how the Lord, touched Coach Hatchell's life to give me a scholarship, and how, you're supposed to dream big and God can really do the impossible. That was always my side of the testimony. But when the Gospel Coalition came and they were like, we want to know why you left UNC, that was a little harder for me. That's not the easiest thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And, I had to pray about it.